All right, I am here with Alan Megargle, cameraman and director of Bigfoot films, in particular one that is streaming right now. I think less than a week old. You can find it on Amazon. It is the Bigfoot Alien Connection Revealed, and also the Back 80, a modern day Bigfoot encounter. Hello, Alan.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, man. Hey, it's been a while. Well, it hasn't been that big of a while. I mean, we had a chance actually to sit back and visit a couple weeks ago. This was before the premiere came out for this Bigfoot documentary. Well, it's an alien Bigfoot documentary, which some people may take issue with blending these things. But I guess we should probably start with Alan and your story and how you got mixed up in this rabbit hole of all this paranormal stuff.
It is though, isn't it?
Hmm.
Is it okay? So you want the whole story with the beginning of Bigfoot and all that?
Well, I don't want to bore you, so you tell me. You tell me what you want to tell me.
All right, that works.
Yeah.
So I've been doing paranormal investigations for a long time, and it wasn't until I believe maybe about 10 years ago now, where I was looking for something to do. I was visiting my parents in upstate New York, up in the Adirondack Mountains, and I was with my good buddy and filmmaking partner Jesse Morgan, and we decided to go on a little Bigfoot hike, just something I whipped up out of nowhere, and we had a little experience there with what we think could have been a tree break that happened just in front of us, just out of view. That kind of got us really interested in it. And when we got back to Ohio, where we were living at the time, we found out about the Ohio Bigfoot Conference, and we kind of went there, and it just kind of got all wrapped up in all things Bigfoot. And then I started making some documentary films in 2015. Um, which was really interesting because then you're talking to a lot more eyewitnesses and getting a little more in depth than your normal Bigfoot investigator, maybe, like we're camping out in the areas that we were filming and really kind of getting into our work a little bit. And then strange things started to happen the more I got into this. And I got approached to work on a film where we kind of tie all these concepts together, the whole thought of aliens and Bigfoot, and even some of the things you had going on at Owl Moon Labs, where you're hearing these almost paranormal voices, and it just kind of made sense to start trying to put it all together and see if maybe it fits together, maybe it doesn't, and
Hmm.
kind of see where it goes. And it's interesting because in Ohio, I was very much involved with a lot of organizations that were truly not into any of this kind of paranormal alien type thing. So there was not a lot of talk about that until I moved out to Colorado a couple of years ago, and we started filming and got to meet people like you and Tom Powell and Joe Hauser from the Montana Vortex, and
Hmm.
really got a sense of the fact that a lot of people are having experiences that don't fit your typical Bigfoot mold. And
Hmm.
for me, I've always been just really open-minded about things. I used to always say that, I wanted Bigfoot to be an ape running around just as much as everybody else did. But, if a UFO dropped a Bigfoot off in front of me, I'd run with it. It's like, this is what it is. Okay, this is what it
Hmm.
is. I wouldn't try to, hide it or discount evidence. That's not something I've ever been about. I've captured video of something invisible walking up to me and all these different things, and it is what it is. I share it with people when I get the chance, and um, the evidence takes you where it's going to take you.
Hmm. Well, I'm gonna write that part down. Something invisible walking up to Alan, and he has video of it. Let me get to that in a second here. Going back to the Back 80, though, that was your first film about Sasquatch.
That was the first film that Jesse and I
Hmm.
directed and produced together
Hmm.
under our Twisted Tree Films brand.
Hmm.
So we kind of knew Suzanne. I actually was just kind of inadvertently part of the investigation team that went to investigate her sighting in 2013.
Hmm.
It seems like it was so long ago now. And I had my camera with me as a good filmmaker,
Hmm.
research investigator would have. So I captured some footage from that, and that was actually the first real kind of investigation that I went on with other more seasoned investigators, and it it's the day that made me a believer.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we went to the place where she saw it, and we did recreations and measurements, and just the story all added up that this had to have been something pretty spectacular. This was not your average bear, and she was very
Mm-hmm.
convincing and believable. And
Mm-hmm.
I left there that day, and I was like, well, I believe her. And then I said, well, I guess that makes me a believer then.
That's a good place to start. Now, the story of Back 80 and Suzanne, does that tell the story of a paranormal Sasquatch encounter?
No, we didn't really get into that too much because I don't think it ever really went there and until maybe recently, but I guess that's, you know, you can talk to her about that. But at the time it was, you know, there were people all around this small town in the middle of Ohio were seeing this creature. And you
Right.
know, probably in about a year's period it was pretty much all over the place. So we were just trying to get to the bottom of it. And you know, we got in contact with a lot of people that have seen it and had experiences. And um, it's
Mm-hmm.
it's an interesting take on the film. I wanted to do something different. It's not about Bigfoot. It's about what happens when a normal person, everyday life, just sees something they're not supposed to see. And,
Mm-hmm.
you know, how do you deal with that? How do you comprehend what just happened? How do you accept it or get others to believe it? And you know, and the fact that she started to have things happen at her house, you know, basically started to come
Mm-hmm.
closer to her. It was clearly personal, you know. And what do you do? How do you deal with that? So
Mm-hmm.
it's more about, you know, the witness side of it than it
Mm-hmm.
is necessarily about, you know, let's forget for the fact what the heck is Bigfoot. Let's just assume, you know, for the movie's sake, that it is what everybody says. It's a, you know, big hairy creature, whatever it is. So let's get into what do you do? You know, how do you deal with that when you see something you're not supposed to see?
Mm-hmm. Aside from Suzanne and her compelling story, was there something that happened at the Back 80 for Alan that turned you to a believer? Was there a specific incident or moment?
I mean, we had a lot during
Mm-hmm.
filming that were convincing things. You know, for the most part, though, it had calmed down by the time we were actually filming. There wasn't a lot going on, but we were actually doing the film was mostly done, and we were doing a Kickstarter campaign to raise some money to get some DVDs made and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And we did a kind of a live feed from the sighting location. And we got a really loud, really close, clear wood knock during the live feed, just kind of by accident. And it was enough where I think we have video up on our YouTube channel from it, but
Mm-hmm.
that we both, Jesse and I both kind of were like, we're trying to finish what we're doing, but we're like, you know,
Yeah,
something just happened. So
right.
you know, that's one of the things we kind of always worry about as filmmakers is
Mm-hmm.
if you do catch something real, you know, what do you do with it? Because
Mm-hmm.
you're out there making a movie, and oh, it's sensationalized, and you know, so
Right.
you're trying to, it's an inner demon that's like, if I filmed clear as day Bigfoot crossing the road while I'm making a movie, I probably wouldn't put it in the movie because you know, it would just discredit everything. So it's it's hard sometimes when you catch something you don't expect and you have to figure out
Mm-hmm.
what to do with it. So
Right. Now, did you stay at Suzanne's property? Did you camp out there? Were you like infiltrated?
yeah, we camped out there several weekends during
Mm.
filming, and we a couple times we actually they had to go out of town, so they just left us the keys. We just stayed at their house and
Really?
watching the dogs and stuff. I mean, we were really integrated down there. I mean, we were probably down there every other weekend for, you know, pretty much the whole year, the whole summer anyway. And the last night that we were there, we decided to bring all of our investigative gear, and we actually filmed our own little mini investigation. And if you watch the back 80 on Amazon, we kind of stuck it on the end so people could see it.
Mm-hmm.
But we had some interesting things happen during that as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just, it's a cool spot. It's
Yeah.
very squatchy, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Well, and now, given the state of our current affairs, we have more than enough time to stream all these things here, including this one, which I haven't seen yet, but I'll be knocking this one out. So the other day, I hopped out of the tub and I'm scrolling through in the bathroom of what's popping up, and all of a sudden I get an update that your documentary called "The Alien Bigfoot Connection Revealed," which was made in mainly the summer. Would you agree, in 2019, and kind of ended midsummerish?
It's
Mm,
interesting. We with a lot of these film projects, it's kind of we look for opportunities where we can get the most bang for our buck. So we're pretty close to the Sasquatch outpost in Bailey, Colorado here, and Ron Moorhead was doing a book signing there. So we did an arrangement, I think November end of 2018.
mm-hmm.
And the owner of the Sasquatch Outpost also believes this same kind of theory that it's much more than just an ape running around. So we took that opportunity to go and kind of kick the project off. And so our very first interview for this was actually Ron Moorhead, which is probably the top get for
Right,
this whole film. So
right.
that kind of kicked everything off on a
Mm-hmm.
really good note. And then we were able to get access to the alien conference they had in Bear Lake, California, where Stanton Freeman was there and Nick Pope and all these really, Nick
Mm-hmm.
Redfern was there, all these people that we really wanted to get. And we just kind of
Mm-hmm.
knocked it all out in one weekend. So then it was just a matter of opportunities coming up, and everybody kept pointing us to different directions, like
Mm-hmm.
Tom Powell says, you got to come out and meet Tobe. And
Mm-hmm.
Tobe's like, you got to go meet Joe Hauser. It's just the work took us to where we needed to go. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of how it all shook out. It probably took almost a year of filming
Mm-hmm.
to get it all.
Yeah, you were dashing all over America in the documentary. You go several places, including, is it Dulce? What was that like? I mean, that's one place that just looks like it just would be so ripe with good footage. Like, as a cinematographer, like, oh my God, look at that! The sun's going down on the mesa. What was that like?
Yeah, I know it's that whole area is absolutely amazing. It's this huge valley that spans from, the southern Colorado down to northern New Mexico, and it's
Mm-hmm.
probably about 6 hours from where we are. So we made the drive, and we made a whole trip out of it. We went to the UFO Watchtower, which is this little tourist trap in I think it's Hooper, Colorado, where they have a platform that you can go up and view the sky, and
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of weird things happen there. And then we stayed at a haunted hotel that night, and then we finally made our way down to Dulce, and we actually had one of the people that lived on the reservation there. I believe he was a native Apache, and
Mm-hmm.
his son that were we had contracted. They were our guides. We had our
Mm-hmm.
permits and everything. They were Bigfoot researchers, investigators down in that area, and they've had a lot of close encounters.
Mm-hmm.
So they took us out in the woods and really kind of gave us the whole layout there. But there's a mountain that kind of overlooks. It's everywhere you are in the reservation. You see this giant mountain, and there's all these stories of Bigfoot walking around and alien craft landing inside the mountain, and all
Mm-hmm.
these there's supposedly a hidden base there, and all these things are
Mm-hmm.
happening. So it was definitely we have to go there kind of place, and
Mm-hmm.
it was pretty great. The son of the guy that we had with us, he was I'm not sure, probably 20s maybe, and he took us up in the mountain and took me on a little hike, which I barely survived because he was just like a mountain goat the way that kid was moving, and I'm trying to film, and it was quite an experience trying to keep up with those guys. And
Mm-hmm.
they have a lot of natural predators down there, so they always went armed to the teeth with rifles and all that kind of stuff too. So
Mm-hmm.
unnerving and feel safe at the same time, I guess.
Is it hard to get interviews with First Nations people?
um, yeah, it can be. We have a way of working with people. I work with my father-in-law actually, Ron Meyer, and he's been doing this kind of thing for so long, and he really has a
I
way.
love the way you put that, man.
Yeah,
That was so good.
he really has a way of making people comfortable, and
Mm-hmm.
and it worked out. Yeah, he's like, hey, here's this guy down there in Dulce, and he used to be a police officer, and you know he he's had these experiences. He's actually filmed UFOs, kind of similar to what you guys were getting in Oregon.
Mm-hmm.
he's like, see what you can do. So I friended him on Facebook, and then I waited a little bit, and then I
Right.
kind of dropped some hints, and he was really
Mm,
into it, and I finally got his number, and I gave him a call, and
mm,
he was really like, yeah, let's do it. But he barely said anything, so I was like, I don't know how this is gonna go,
mm-hmm.
but all I really got was, yes, you can come, yes,
Right. I
tell me
know
what
it.
happened. And he was like, well,
Right.
didn't you see the video? And it was just kind of
Right.
like, well, let's just go for it, see what happens. And
Yeah.
yeah, he was great. He gave a great
Mm-hmm.
interview, and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it just was one of those things that
Mm-hmm.
worked out.
Right. I know I've waited on a couple of interviews from First Nations people, and one time it took up to 6 months, and it was like a scheduled call. Like this is the wrong time to call. We can talk about this in spring. We can't talk about it in the winter.
Mm.
And me just being a gringo, I'm like, okay, you got it. So I called back, and the meeting happened, and it was just like cultural, difference totally.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, it's a little bit of a hurdle, especially when you're on a budget, on a time schedule. It's just like, okay, well, I don't got 6 months, so I got to move to the next, interview. But yeah, that's really interesting that you got to do that. Now, lights going into a mountain is something that they talk about all the time at East City Ranch, which is 3 hours south of us here. Base is inside Mount Adams. Base is inside the Mesa there at Dulce. What do you think is really going on? Because I mean, we're kind of past the point. We're totally past the point that UFOs exist. I mean, we know that we have a phenomena here. It's not a question of if it exists anymore. Would
Absolutely.
you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've kind of known that since I was a
Mm,
child, and I don't really know that I ever had an experience per se, but
right.
I just kind of believe early on that it's got to be happening.
Right. So here these film these lights going into the mountain. So therefore they attach a base to it. I don't know. Has anybody described a facility? Has anybody been inside the base? I think there are rumors and legends, right, of people being in Dulce Mountain seeing aliens.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't find anybody that was willing to say that, but had people that say at certain times you could see what looked like a door open and a craft fly inside,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of out of place military craft and vehicles coming through there, and just a lot of things that suggest there's something more going on.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've come to accept with filmmaking and Bigfoot at the same time, when you break the cameras out, a lot of times nothing happens. So you just
Right.
kind of have to roll with what does happen and be ready if something really does happen to try to get what you can. But so
Mm-hmm.
not a whole lot happened when we were there, but we definitely, you know, got the
Mm-hmm.
feel of the place and picked up the vibe. And it is just the layout down there is very remote, and it doesn't make sense why there would be some of these things happening there that
Right.
people claim to have seen.
Now you got to talk to Stanton Freeman and Rosemary Ellen Guiley. Both have passed. Were you in there for those interviews, and what was that like?
Yeah, those were a couple of the ones that we did at Bear Lake in California. Um, yeah, Stanton was at the conference, and we kind of talked to him a little bit before, and he's like, "Yeah, let's go do an interview. I'll be free in about 20 minutes." So we put him in our car and took him back to we were rented a cabin like an Airbnb, and we just sat him down at the kitchen table and started talking Bigfoot.
You kidnapped Stanton.
Yeah, it was
I
absolutely
love that.
surreal, yeah, and
Yeah.
pretty incredible, and
Yeah.
just to have the world's expert on Roswell and all things
Mm-hmm.
UFOs sitting in our Airbnb talking
Mm-hmm.
about Bigfoot, no less.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the things that he said, we were just kind of looking at each other, jaws dropped, like, I can't believe he just said that.
Yeah, when
So
he started diving into Sasquatch, I was pretty impressed, I guess, because he didn't have to do that. And,
no,
it's like trying to get an aper to talk about UFOs. They don't have to do it. But the ones that do, you're always extra impressed. At least I am. Like, okay, bravo, you're on,
yeah,
Team Truth. Go for it.
and the surprising thing was, like, he was totally great about it. He talked about everything openly. He had no one with him. I mean, he had no
Oh, he didn't have any
assistant.
handlers or any.
Nope, he
Yeah.
was just it was the three of us and him in our car driving him back to our Airbnb. These strangers, and like, all right, I guess
Yeah.
when you have a camera, people trust you a little more.
Yeah. Now, what is that? That's interesting remark, and it's not exactly, related to. Well, maybe it is a little related to Sasquatch and cameras, but what is it about the camera that produces credibility? Because people love it pointed at them.
Yeah,
I mean,
it
not
is.
everybody, but it means something like, oh, they're going to point it at me. What
Yeah,
is
yeah.
it? What do you think that is?
Well, I'll tell you, I mean, I think a big part of it is never underestimate the promotion that it'll do for you. No matter what you're doing, if
Mm,
you're running a hotel, because we've done some haunted, things where we just showed up out of the blue and like, oh yeah, the basement door is open, just go on in. They're fine with that stuff. But
mm-hmm,
I think that opportunity to get some free promotion helps, and
mm-hmm.
um, when when you're there with a purpose, and we're pretty obviously doing something. We have a film, we can talk to you and tell you what it's about and what we're trying to accomplish. And I think a lot of these people, especially like Stanton Freeman, they have something they want to say. This is an
Right.
opportunity that for them to comment on something. How many times has someone asked Stanton Freeman about Bigfoot? Because that's not what you ask him.
Right.
So I think he really relished the opportunity to talk about that.
Right. Now, you're seeing segments of all these interviews with, Rosemary Ellen Guiley and Nick Redfern. And um, were these lengthy interviews that you had to cut down? Like, oh, no, I have to,
Yeah, yeah. I would say we probably did at least 30 minutes, if not longer, 30 minutes
hmm
to an hour with each one. And I believe, I'm not sure the channel offhand, but I think under Center Communications is the company that we did this under. I believe they have a few of these
hmm
uncut up there on their YouTube channel that you can
Oh,
watch.
really?
So
Okay.
I'll try to get a link for you and your listeners.
hmm
Um,
Now, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, so yeah, there's a lot of stuff we get into, and sometimes it's really hard because when we kind of pick someone that we want to interview, we already know what we want to get from them. They fill this part of the story, but a lot of
hmm
times they want to talk about other things. So we do capture stuff that we don't need or we can't really use, and it's unfortunate sometimes. But
hmm
one of the things that we do and Center Communications has done, they've been around for many decades now, is we keep that footage, and if we're doing our next film, we're like, hey, Stanton talked about that.
mm
We already have releases for all that stuff, and we can pull it out, and you might see it again someday. You never
hmm
know.
Right. Communications. Okay. So that's who you guys are going through. Um, Interesting. Well, I took a look at the film there, and it's about an hour and 34 minutes or so. It's not more than 2 hours for sure, and it's got quite a bit of content on there from, like I said, people you definitely will recognize, including Nick Redfern, who, I mean, that guy's writing a book probably right now, and he'll write a book in 5 minutes. He's always writing.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
what was it like interviewing Nick?
Nick was interesting because we didn't get a lot of time, and we were just trying to find somewhere quiet. And the conference we were at was very loud, so we ended up just sitting them in the driver's seat of our car and opening the door and filming them right there. So it was great. I've met Nick before at a couple of
hmm
different events. So yeah, he was great, and I think he got a chance to talk
hmm
about some stuff he doesn't normally talk about as well.
Right. How has this changed you, man? Because it's totally changed me. Like, knowing what I know now, um, I just feel so much happier. I'm like a happier person knowing what I know. I mean, it is frustrating not knowing it all, but would I really want to like not have a mystery? How has it affected you? Because you've been, you had your cherry popped along the way here, and so have I. So what's it like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I've had so many experiences through the 10 years of just doing this, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of paranormal ones, 10 years before that. So, um, seeing it all kind of come together, I think for me here in the doing the interviews, it wasn't until we got out to Owl Moon Labs that we really got a chance to talk to more of an investigator type rather than just an author or personality, and get hands on in one of these places where all this stuff seems to be happening.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was changing. It
Right.
was I left there feeling like I knew something that other people didn't. I think
Mm-hmm.
there
It's
there
a
wasn't a lot that happened out there, but
mm,
there was enough for me to know that what
Mm,
you guys were showing us and the
mm,
video and the audio you played for us was the
mm,
real deal, you know. And I think having Tom Powell there, he's
mm.
he's one of my favorites from way back, you know, when I first started all this. I think that was really cool and helped sell it all to me better
All
too.
right.
I mean, we actually got, you know, we landed at the airport in Oregon, Portland, and we had gotten in really late. The flight was delayed. It was like 2 in the morning or something. We stayed at a hotel, and then we drove and we met Tom Powell, and we actually you know, he cooked us breakfast, and then we went down to see you guys. And you know, it was like what, 2.5 hour drive, just talking Bigfoot with Tom the whole way. And then we got
Mm.
back to his place after we left Eugene, and we spent the night, slept on his couch and had breakfast again. And you know, it was really interesting experience and really cool.
We could do a whole podcast just on Tom Powell's wackiness.
We could.
Yeah.
But you know, he's one that I admire because he's the same way. You know, I don't have a preconceived notion on what we're looking at. So if it does this, then it does that. I'm not going to try to say it didn't do that when it just did
Mm,
it. So, you know, whatever happens, happens. And
mm-hmm,
I've definitely, you know, I made a conscious effort to try to bring something home
mm-hmm,
from Oregon, and I feel like I brought a little
mm-hmm,
piece of it back because we definitely have had weirdness happening since then. So,
mm-hmm. You know, and I remember looking at the book, The Locals, Tom Powell's first book, right? And it must have been 2005 or something like that. And I'm seeing the back a guy with his head looking out towards the sun with a Hawaiian shirt, like he's just got out of a Jimmy Buffett concert, you know. And Tom's got he's got like an old school Hollywood jawline. Like you know, there's not a lot of guys that look like Tom Powell. He just has a presence and then he's got his voice.
yep, yep,
And you know, when I met him, I'm like, oh my God, that you don't have to be, you know, a cookie cutter, you know, a hole in camo. You can be this like semi quasi stand up comedian with
yeah,
this
yeah,
giant brain wearing a Hawaiian shirt out looking for Sasquatch. And, you know, it was, it really just impressed the hell out of me that that could coexist and everybody was going to accept it and talk about you know, portals and talk about you know, synchronicity. That's his big thing, right? Is
yep, yep.
and that's what he really taught me. Talk about synchronicity, Alan, as far as your experience with this, and you know, that when things start aligning that don't necessarily seem like they should, but they kind of like are destined to align at that moment. Did that happen while you were filming?
It's happened a lot, and when I think back to some of my other experiences, I think all of those experiences combined led me to where I am now. And you know, I think it's just a matter of being open to it, so that when it happens, you don't just dismiss it as, well, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
fit what I thought was going to happen, so it didn't happen. And you know, that's just not the way I work. I've had so many different things happen that it just, I don't know, it just makes more sense to me that something more is going on. I feel like I've been in so many close encounters that if it was as simple as an ape, I'd have something to show for it. You know, it boggles my mind that it didn't go further, and things went the way they did, and it just, you know, all that stuff. That I think it's more so what didn't line up sometimes
Mm-hmm.
than what it is. And I recognize too, you know, I'm used to that now, where something happens that's kind of profound, and I take note. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
don't just try to dismiss that. And it's happened all along
Mm-hmm.
the way here, all along the way.
You know, after you guys left filming, I talked to someone from Finding Bigfoot about everything going on at the Al Moon Lab to see if we could get some energy behind the case, in particular some of the, you know, the prints that we pulled out of there. And this person, you know, is on a solid aper, and I've known that all along. But I was surprised to hear out of their mouth that they would say that, you know, Sasquatch is most likely a thought form as well. And I
Hmm.
said, wait, what did you say? Are you calling Sasquatch a tulpa, right? Like some kind of thought form that we're creating along the way here. That was a really surprising comment that they didn't want on the record. So I'm not saying their name, but those are the kind of comments that, as a filmmaker, you would love to get something like that on the record. Did you find yourself getting stuff on the record from people just like, now, wait a second, can you scrub that? I didn't. Mm-mm.
Oh, no, we didn't really have that. No, people
No.
are, I mean, people
Mm-hmm.
kind of own what they say for the most part. I mean, I think, some of the things that James Bobo Fay said were
Mm-hmm.
not something you would have ever saw on Finding Bigfoot. And I was
Mm-hmm.
really surprised when we were done with that interview, um, that that he shared some of that with us,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really excited about that. He's a really, he's a
Mm-hmm.
great guy, and that was the first time I really got a chance to really get some serious Bigfoot questions asked
Right.
to him. And he seems kind of like fun and a little silly and stuff, but he
Mm-hmm.
he really gets down to business, and he's got some really interesting stories to tell. He's definitely had experiences that
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a lot of people have had or would admit to.
No, without Bobo Fay, there would be a lot less of the story of the Al Moon Lab, because Bobo, back in 2012, was responsible for finding an area that really began the understanding of gifting, especially gifts of significance. And that happened underneath the watch of Bobo. It's a lengthy story, and Tom Powell wrote about it, actually. But what about gifting for you, Alan? We talked a lot about that when you're out. Have you experienced that yourself?
So that's something that I've been reluctant to believe in and to try. But as part of this filming, it definitely came
Mm-hmm.
out. I mean, it was a huge part of what we saw out in the Owl Moon Labs, and there was a pretty consistent theme to a lot of these places we went to where stuff like that was happening. So I've
Mm-hmm.
started to experiment with that here. We've got lots and lots of footage, and we're trying to figure out exactly what that footage means, and is it something I don't really know yet. Whatever
Mm-hmm.
it is very, very incomplete. So
Mm-hmm.
there's more to the story that we need to get, and I don't know. We're trying to decide um, what that is, but we haven't really I haven't really experienced that firsthand where I've gotten something like like a gift back.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I will. I think it's more about me right now,
Mm-hmm.
trying to accept that. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I think they're around and they're ready to do that. I just have to, you know.
No, here comes the question I was going to ask you, and I'll just go ahead and ask it now because we're leading into it. One of the things that you did was you purchased a drum that was soaked in one of the hairs that we had taken from the knee impressions, and the hide was soaked with just one individual hair, and then we painted a profile of a Sasquatch, and you ended up buying that. But you also ended up, before you left, listening to some audio of what we call the mystery ladies, and it's just a back and forth conversation. And you took the drum home. You tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, sure. First of all, when I saw the drum, I knew I was bringing it home. So I really appreciate that. It's really cool, and everything that we kind of learned out there, I
Mm-hmm.
felt like this was maybe what I was missing, was just this connection to the being itself. Something to trigger this. So when we've been going to our gifting site that we have now, I bring the drum and I beat it 3 times before we go, and I beat it 3 times before we leave. Just trying to conjure up that mojo that's in there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Sure.
yeah, I brought the drum home, and my wife was downstairs. She was writing her book, and I'm pretty exhausted from all the traveling and late nights out there in Oregon with you guys. And I was listening to a couple sounds on my phone, and then I fell asleep. And that was probably a couple hours later. My wife told me in the morning that she was down there writing her book, and we had like kind of like a split level, so she was down in the lower part, and up towards the upstairs, she heard what sounded like a woman or two women, and their voices kind of repeating. And she thought it was me listening to the stuff, so she'd come to yell at me, you got to go to bed, you got to go up for my, got to go to work tomorrow. So, but I was sound asleep, so she's like, okay, that's really odd. So she's telling me about it in the morning, and as soon as she said, the repeating voices with the women, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a minute. So I contacted you and said, we're not going to put this in the movie, but I need a copy of that. And
Mm-hmm.
I played it for her, and I says, did it sound like this? She said, yeah, that's exactly what it sounded like. I was like, and where'd you hear that from? It was coming from inside our house the day I got home from.
Yeah. I don't know what to do for you, man. you
I,
you said you liked it, right? You're
I'm
cool with it. You
happy
don't want to
about.
give the drum back.
Heck no, no. It's exactly what I was hoping would happen.
Yeah.
So, and she's
Hmm.
very open to all this. That's actually how we met.
Hmm.
Was she was filming a Bigfoot documentary that I was in, and that's kind of how we we got together. So, no, it's a good thing. It's brought us good luck for sure.
Wait, we got to talk about this romance here. Wait,
Yeah,
what's this? I want to know about this story.
yeah. So Jesse and I, my Bigfoot partner, we run a Bigfoot camp out um, in Ohio called Bigfoot Adventure Weekends, and we got contacted from Center Communications. They were doing a show called Chasing Bigfoot, and they found out about our weekend, and they wanted to come film. So they were in town filming the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. So we met them, and it went pretty good. We said, sure, our event was in a few weeks. So they came back, and he brought his daughter, and she was actually the primary director on the project. And when she left Ohio to go back to Colorado, we kind of kept talking, and eventually we a romance blossomed, and I moved out to Colorado, and now we're married and chasing
Wow.
Bigfoot. So
Wow. Bravo. I love that kind of stuff.
yeah, you just never know where this is going to take
Hmm.
you.
No, I mean, now you've got the perfect couple cocktail party story to tell. It's so
Exactly.
much better than saying, well, I swiped right and, she was
Exactly.
hot and I was wearing a thong, which was
Oh,
awkward for her. But yeah, I know how these things go.
exactly.
Uh, I've been in quarantine for 15 days. You got to give me a little levity here. I'm going a little stir crazy in the cabin. Um, when we film this, we're actually one day under a lot of the country going into quarantine, which is such a strange thing to talk about. I was on the phone today for 3 hours talking to Chrysler Capital about, rolling over payments right now, which a lot of people are having to do. And, I'm talking to the gal. I was like, yeah, I'm in a quarantine zone. I'm in a hot zone. And, it's times like this. You think about the supernatural. You think about the timing of where we are as far as something like disclosure with these UAPs or UFOs, alien abduction stories. All the transparency was basically happening as this was developing, and it makes me wonder. Like, I'm not trying to go down a conspiracy rabbit hole to say that one's connected to the other, but it's really interesting that no one wants to talk about what was going to be super big news. What do you think there's any connection to when disclosure seems to be imminent, something comes in and kind of takes over it, like, no, well, you need to unite and go to war or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's happened so many times in our country for so many
Hmm.
different things that it does start to feel a little suspicious.
Hmm.
Like Roswell, and all of a sudden the weather balloon shows up, and you're like, okay, that's kind of
Hmm.
interesting timing for that.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. I
I
don't
don't know.
know. I
I
don't
mean,
know either.
you got to be a little bit careful when you start talking about this stuff because everybody's super sensitive about it.
Yeah.
But you
Well, the
know,
one thing it has taught me is there is no way the country is prepared to know the full extent of the aliens.
right? Yeah,
There's no way
right.
we're ready for that.
This is actually, yeah, this is like a dry run for a worldview change, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Or the Bigfoot for that matter, or whatever we've got going on here. I don't know that we're ready for it. Maybe it is a test.
Hmm.
Like
Well.
Tom Powell suggests, and I don't believe this actually made the film, but he kind of thinks that this might all be leading somewhere where, a lot of these Bigfoot experiences seem like tests. They show you a little bit, they give you a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. It seems to get a little bit more, and then maybe it pulls
Mm-hmm.
back a little bit there. Kind of feels like a test. And
Mm-hmm.
he suggests that maybe, we're trying to earn our spot at this, universal table
Mm-hmm.
of openness, that we start to understand what's really happening here and the scale of it all.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe this is part of it. Who knows?
Yeah, are those words comforting to you as far as?
It's a little scary, I think. The idea that you know Bigfoot could show up wherever is what I
Mm-hmm.
had to kind of come to terms with when I
Mm-hmm.
got back from our Oregon trip,
Mm-hmm.
because that was some of the things I learned. I put a feather in our little altar, and then I drove 3 hours home, and the feather was on my doorstep. Like this, this blows my mind. Like
Wait,
how is
no,
this? How?
you got to tell this story.
Well, these are just I don't know the whole story, but these are some of the
Okay. Oh,
types of
this isn't
things. Like
your story.
no,
This
no,
is a
these are
story
just
you
like
heard.
yeah,
Okay,
kind of some of the stories and some of the types of things that people
gotcha.
talk about. Like um, we left the house to go run errands and locked all the doors and
Mm-hmm.
windows, and then come home and there's a giant rock in my living room.
Mm-hmm.
Like how these are the kind of things that
Mm-hmm.
they don't fit any mold.
No.
Alien, paranormal, it makes no
Mm-mm.
sense. So
No.
now what are we talking about? So
Right. When you were filming, was there any temptation to bring in the element of poltergeist or ghost because it fits within the UFO and Bigfoot world? Was that ever discussed? Maybe we should talk to a couple ghost hunters too.
no, I just don't think we wanted to go that direction. But
Mm-hmm.
I think I probably have more experience in paranormal realms, so I feel like I did a lot of that. We brought a lot of equipment and tried a lot of things. When we went to the Montana Vortex, I brought a lot of gizmos and gadgets and tried to take measurements, and so I think we kind of did that through me a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about Joe Hauser. Let's talk. I've never been to the Montana Vortex. What was that like?
Yeah, so it's interesting because on the surface it kind of looks like just a tourist trap. There's a crooked building, and you go in and you get disoriented. But it's like, all right, I've been in here for a half an hour, and I still feel like I want to puke. So like, why is that?
Mm-hmm.
I'm holding on to something. I'm solid, even though I'm at an angle, but I still feel like the whole room is spinning. And then as soon as you step back out, you're like, it goes away. So
Mm-hmm.
it feels like some sort of energy in there. And I had a hard time trying to really measure it, but I don't think that really took away for me the fact that something was
Mm-hmm.
happening there. And then, we were there for a long time, pretty much a whole day. He had closed down the whole facility for us, and we were there until I don't know, 9 o'clock at night or 10 o'clock at night. So we went back after dark, and it
Mm-hmm.
felt it felt less intense later on, which really kind of led credibility to the fact
Mm-hmm.
that there is energy in there for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm. Did he explain why the building is crooked? Because that would leave the impression that is, an optical illusion or something to that effect. Why did they even bother putting a structure on it, and let alone having it tilt? Did he get into that?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. He purchased it like that, so it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
something that
Right.
he built.
Right.
So I'm not, I'm not sure what came first.
Right.
Was it the vortex or the house?
Right.
I
Right.
don't really know.
I don't know.
But there's interesting because they've kind of isolated, I think, several different
Mm-hmm.
vortexes outside of the house around the property,
Mm-hmm.
and there's different little things, experiments you can try that
Mm-hmm.
kind of show off some of the power of it, and it is really it's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
mean,
Joe, go ahead.
I think if you're completely just this isn't real, it's probably not enough for you to be like it is real now. But I
Right.
think if you're open to it and you kind of see it and really kind of try to
Mm-hmm.
understand what's happening there. It is strange, some people take photographs and their bodies are shifted, like they're
Mm-hmm.
not connected anymore in the picture.
Mm-hmm.
Where else have you ever seen that happen before?
And there's other strange things showing up on photos and videos. You guys caught something that was good enough to put in the documentary. I don't know what you caught. Some people may think that it's an insect of some kind. Explain to people what you caught on video.
Yeah, so we were all in there filming, and I was kind of in the frame of the camera doing some measurements and stuff and filming. And uh, I don't know, a white on the film, it's just kind of this white blur that kind of comes into the shot. So it comes into the crooked building, and it flies right up to me, and then it just kind of disappears, maybe sort of out the
Mm-hmm.
window, but just kind of disappears. But um, when we kind of started to look at it, it just
Mm-hmm.
there's no light inside the house. It's just dark
Mm-hmm.
in there. I mean, it wasn't the daytime, the sunlight coming through, but this thing didn't cast
Mm-hmm.
any shadows across the body of it, even though it was probably pretty small. So it was almost like it was illuminated itself, which caught our attention. And then we
Mm-hmm.
kind of started to play around with slowing that down and looking at it and zooming in a little bit more. And it's just I don't know. It's hard to explain.
Mm-hmm.
I have no idea what it was. I mean, it could be an insect, but there's something weird about it that just really kind
Mm-hmm.
of stood out to us as something different.
If it wasn't for what Joe Hauser had caught on video, which you'd seen, which is this footage of who he calls Raybo, which is an amazing unreleased um, video inside this vortex at the Montana vortex. And it's hard to explain technically what you're looking at, but it looks like something out of a science fiction movie in a plasma state interacting with a camera at the behest of Joe, basically saying, "Show me your true self. Show me what you guys really look like." Well, the next day he did, or it did.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
what you caught had the same kind of plasma look to it that I've seen with what Joe. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, again, there was just something, I've seen a lot of footage,
Mm-hmm.
especially doing paranormal investigating. We always film and have cameras rolling, and
Mm-hmm.
I see all kinds of stuff like that. But this was really one of those moments where I was like,
Mm-hmm.
wait a second, back that up. Let's take a look at that again.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there was just something about it that was
Mm-hmm.
different.
And he also got an image of what looks like a Sasquatch inside there, like standing off into the corner. Did you get a explanation of how that was captured?
Yeah, yeah, we did. He put a security camera in there briefly, and obviously he received some word through the Bigfoot that that wasn't acceptable, so it came down pretty soon. But um, yeah, he had the security camera in there, and it was basically pointed to the center of the house. I mean, their property's all fenced in, and it was the middle of the night, and there was just two of them there, and he kind of noticed that there was something happening. There was some light and stuff, and he kind of watched it, and uh, this figure appears just slightly off center of the camera that looks like your kind of your trail cam photo that you see once in a while, and there's like
Mm-hmm.
this shoulder and head, but huge inside the house.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
How is this possible? And then, like you said, there were these other like light anomalies, and it got washed out, and then it almost disappeared. It looked to me almost like something trying to come through the portal, and,
Mm-hmm.
and probably did come through the portal.
Have you ever seen a portal or anything that you would classify as an opening through space and time?
I don't know that you can see it, but I think you could feel it, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that could be what's going on there.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely not a feeling I've had before.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just a dizziness, but there's
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know, it's almost like when you're in an airplane coming down, like there's these pressures there that are really
Mm-hmm.
unexplainable.
Right. Okay, the last thing I wanted to ask you here, Alan, is regarding the last scene of the movie, and it involves you sitting on Indian style in the Almoon shop or carport. Now, you experienced what you experienced there. I'm not quite sure what you experienced, and you asked me while we were filming if I'd ever seen anything move, and I said no. We just hear the sounds, but there's a but. We'd seen the interaction afterwards as well, including things that had been tossed at great distances after we found them. But most of the things would happen as soon as you close the door. Oddly enough, so describe some of the things, and just for the record, do you feel like any of that was shenanigans or misdiagnosis of weather temperature on the metal rivets popping and expanding? Explain maybe what you're feeling about, and if you think that, I don't care, so I
So,
just want to know your perspective.
so here, I'll give you the honest truth here. So, I was there with my father-in-law Ron, and he was out there with you guys. So I don't feel like there were any shenanigans. I mean, I think he was actually filming all that, so we have on video what you were up to. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't feel like there was any interference there. And I think I I wanted to believe that it was the shed cooling, or
Mm-hmm.
uh, pine cones
Mm-hmm.
bouncing off the top of it. But going out there, I was like, I just I didn't want to believe it. I don't know why. I think it just I still want to be skeptical. I don't want to be like,
Mm-hmm.
that's a Bigfoot everywhere you go.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
so
Me
then
neither.
so I get there and like, oh, so here it is. I'm like, wow, there are no trees around here. I mean, close enough to interfere
Mm,
with the shed. And then getting inside of it, it was well after dark, and I can tell you that as it cooled down, it didn't really pop. I mean, even when we
mm,
were there for the cooling, it didn't do
mhm,
that. So I don't think it was temperature related. And in the video, I asked you if you've ever seen things move. And the reason I asked you that is because with the noises I was hearing, I was expecting to see things move. Like that
mhm,
was what it sounded like. There were popping and snapping kind of noises,
mhm,
like someone hitting their knuckle up against the side of it or something like that.
mhm,
But there were other noises too that I don't know that, we really got it captured, and I don't know that it
mhm,
would even really come through. But it sounded like something at one point I could almost hear and feel something walking and
mhm.
like breathing inside there with me. So it didn't feel it. Yeah, it felt like I was not alone.
Yeah, yeah, and you were in there with a neighbor, I think, too, at one point, Ren,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was in the same position you were, and he thought exactly the same thing. And he'd worked with Lloyd Pye and Lauren Coleman before that, and so he kind of went through the same process and ended up having his own crazy encounter in there. And so I was laughing at the fact that the cycle was kind of happening to you, and now here's Ren sitting by you like, oh, this is legit. Wait till it
Yeah.
starts to occur.
Yeah, yeah. And,
Mm-hmm.
and it almost, thinking about it now, it hadn't even really occurred to me until we're talking just now, but, you know, maybe that popping noise is somehow related to the energy that's happening inside of there as this thing tries to manifest or become more physical in
Mm-hmm.
some way. And that, again, why I kind of asked, do you ever see anything moving? Because it just felt to me like
Mm-hmm.
I should be seeing something moving just the way it sounded. So
Mm-hmm.
maybe it wasn't physical objects moving, but maybe it was something moving within.
Passing through matter, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I felt too, especially when it came to those mystery ladies, is that um, you hear the ambient sound in the background. It almost sounds like something's been tuned into a radio show. Like you hear something happening with these ladies and background noise. But if you could just picture me ripping space and time, and there's a scene unfolding back here, and it's like a party developing and women talking, and then space and time closing. I think that's kind of what happens. I mean, as crazy as that sound, is that something that other people described to you while you were out as far as witnessing something like that? Because I mean, we never did, but you've heard claims from people like Adam Davies who said they've witnessed this.
Yeah, I mean, stuff similar, to
Mm-hmm.
that. Like the one interview we just happened to catch when we were up at the Sasquatch outpost doing the interview with Ron Moorhead. A witness came in and he let us talk to him. He was a big biker guy, and he said that he saw kind of this Bigfoot silhouette pop out from behind the tree up in the trail in front of him, and then all of a sudden a bright light appeared behind him, and it walked towards the light, and the light and the figure disappeared together at the same time. Like
Wow.
those kinds of things where it kind of seems like
Mm-hmm.
maybe you saw it leaving.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the rarest of rare, but it doesn't mean it's not potentially what it
Mm-hmm.
was.
I almost forgot to ask you about this statement you made right out of the gate about and something invisible on film. Tell that story.
Yeah, so this was, well before I was really fully on board with this whole concept that all these things might somehow be related. But I've had some experiences that put the thought in my mind. So we were at one of our Bigfoot adventure weekends, and I had myself and two other attendees, and we were walking a trail pretty remote in the forest down there in Ohio, and we were probably an hour plus deep into this hike, and we started to hear some, the typical tree breaks, like something's walking heavy is walking through the forest. And we kind of stopped, and we didn't really see much, but we had a thermal imaging camera with us, and we couldn't really pick anything up, so we kind of kept going. And then at one point it was really, like, okay, there's definitely something there, so we stopped, and turn off all of our lights. We're sitting there in the dark, and you just hear crunch, crunch, getting louder and louder, and I'm like, um, "Where's it at?" And to my the guy with the thermal, and he's like, "I got nothing, no heat signature. I don't see anything." I'm like, "Okay, it's getting closer," and now it's 20 feet maybe by the sounds of it. Where is it?
Yeah.
I got nothing. There's some trees in front of me, and then it finally got to the point where I'm like, all right, we're like one or two steps away from me getting plowed over. So I turned on a really bright flashlight. I had white flashlight, and there was nothing there. So I,
Wow.
I, I walk off the trail, and I'm looking behind the trees, and I'm looking up, I'm looking down, I'm looking around, I'm like scanning with the thermal. We got nothing. So I get back on the trail, and well, that was pretty surreal. That was really a strange experience. And then we shut the light off, and we're just kind of sitting there trying to decide what's happening. And then crunch, crunch, and it walked away.
Wow.
So whatever it was right in front of me. I probably walked all around it or through it or who knows what, but I don't know how to explain that. But it left all of us kind of in disbelief.
Right. Well, maybe it was a giant leprechaun.
It could have been. I was this close to a pot of gold.
That's right. Oh my gosh.
If only.
Yeah, it's St. Patrick's Day when we recorded this, and I don't know about you, but I've got a pint of Guinness down in the fridge waiting for this evening. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, Alan. And again, the documentary is on Amazon now. Is it on Amazon Prime yet, or just Amazon?
I believe it's for rent right now.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it's on Amazon regular. It's like $3.99 to rent, $9.99 to buy, something close to that. And it's the Bigfoot alien connection revealed. Also, the back 80, a modern day Bigfoot encounter. You can also find that on Amazon. Thanks again, man, and
Thanks a lot.
hope to talk to you soon.
For sure.
All right, have a good evening.
You too.
Bye.